In the unforgiving expanse of Arizona's Superstition Mountains, where monsoon storms transform parched landscapes into deadly flash flood zones and survival balances on split-second decisions, one woman's extraordinary compassion defies all expectations. This is the remarkable story of Dr. Mackenzie Hayes, a 34-year-old rural physician who delivered twin babies during a catastrophic flash flood, sheltering the newborns and their dying mother in a remote cabin for 3 harrowing days. Through medical expertise, resourcefulness, and an innate connection with a culture not her own, Mackenzie not only saved 2 innocent lives, but found herself transformed by an experience few could imagine, and even fewer would survive. Her story's conclusion came not through conventional means, but through the arrival of Sarah Whitefeather's family, led by her brother, Gabriel Whitefeather, an Apache healer whose traditional knowledge and tracking abilities brought him to Mackenzie's isolated cabin in the aftermath of the most devastating storm system to hit the region in over 50 years. What followed would challenge fundamental assumptions about family, cultural boundaries, and the profound connections formed when modern medicine meets ancient wisdom in the crucible of survival. Join us as we uncover the astonishing tale of sacrifice, survival, and the sacred bonds formed when one woman's medical oath extends far beyond professional duty. This is a story that challenges our understanding of both modern healthcare and the enduring wisdom of Native American healing traditions that have sustained communities for thousands of years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer of 2019 had brought unprecedented rainfall to central Arizona, with meteorological records documenting rainfall totals exceeding historical averages by nearly 60%. By early August, flash flood warnings had become a near-daily occurrence, transforming normally dry creek beds into raging torrents with little warning. For residents of smaller communities scattered throughout the region's rugged terrain, this forecast offered not promise, but peril. Roads becoming impassable, power outages extending for days, and emergency services stretched beyond capacity. Among those monitoring the worsening conditions was Dr. Mackenzie Hayes, whose rural medical practice served communities scattered across nearly 200 square miles of challenging terrain. Mackenzie had built her reputation providing essential healthcare to underserved populations, traveling to remote locations when patients couldn't reach her small clinic, and bridging cultural divides that had historically limited medical access. For indigenous communities, her work balanced modern medical expertise with practical improvisation, contributing to improved health outcomes while respecting traditional practices that remained vital to many families she served. Mackenzie had moved to Arizona 6 years earlier from Boston, abandoning a promising but unfulfilling career in a prestigious urban hospital. The transition hadn't been easy. Her parents, both specialized surgeons with established practices, viewed her career choice as wasting her potential. Her former fiancé, Richard, had refused to leave his surgical residency at Massachusetts General, ultimately choosing career advancement over their relationship. But Mackenzie had remained resolute, drawn to the harsh beauty of the Southwest by something she could never fully articulate, a calling that only found purpose in bringing healing to forgotten places. Some people are born with healing in their hands, her grandmother Catherine had told her before her passing. A midwife who had delivered over 2,000 babies in rural Kentucky during the 1950s and 60s, she had recognized in her granddaughter the same commitment to care that had shaped her own life. It was her grandmother's antique medical bag, refitted with modern supplies, that Mackenzie now carried to remote homes and community centers throughout her practice region. The clinic stood on the outskirts of Cooper Springs, a former mining town that had reinvented itself as a gateway to outdoor recreation. A modest single-story building with examination rooms, basic emergency facilities, and solar panels Mackenzie had installed to ensure power during increasingly frequent outages. A small apartment attached to the rear provided living quarters. The blended practicality with carefully chosen comforts, books lining every wall, a piano she played to decompress after difficult cases, and large windows framing views of distant mesas. To many in the medical establishment, her practice seemed extreme, too isolated, too resource-limited, too removed from specialized support. To Mackenzie, it offered the perfect balance between meaningful service and independence. The clinic's walls displayed mementos of connections formed through her work, hand-woven baskets gifted by Apache families after difficult deliveries, letters from patients whose lives she'd saved, photographs documenting healing across cultural boundaries. But it was her work with Native American communities, particularly the San Carlos Apache, that had most profoundly shaped her practice. Through patience, respect, and genuine interest in traditional healing practices, Mackenzie had gradually built trust where historical trauma had created deep suspicion of outside medical providers. Her approach combined evidence-based medicine with profound respect for cultural practices, never dismissing traditional remedies but working to integrate them when safe and appropriate. Dr. Taylor Mitchell, medical director for the regional hospital system, had become both colleague and friend through their shared commitment to rural healthcare. What makes Mackenzie exceptional isn't just her clinical skill, Dr. Mitchell later explained to investigators. It's her cultural humility. She understands that healing happens within cultural contexts, not despite them. She honors traditions while providing the best of modern medicine. This balanced approach had earned Mackenzie unique access to communities where outside providers were typically viewed with suspicion. When tribal elders faced health decisions, they increasingly requested her presence to help translate between medical systems and ensure treatments respected their values and traditions. August should have marked a brief respite in Mackenzie's demanding schedule. Instead, the intensifying monsoon season had doubled her workload, treating injuries from flood-related accidents, managing chronic conditions when patients couldn't reach larger facilities, and coordinating with emergency services as infrastructure failed throughout the region. The weather forecast had briefly stabilized, with meteorologists projecting a 3-day window of reduced rainfall. "It's not great, but it's the best window we're likely to get for at least 2 weeks," Taylor had told Mackenzie over a hurried lunch at the clinic. "If you're going to check on the Watson family and the others up in the high country, this is your chance. Their satellite phone has been offline since Tuesday, and Mrs. Watson's diabetes needs monitoring." For Mackenzie, the opportunity was crucial. Beyond Mrs. Watson, 3 other families in the remote area required medical attention, including a child recovering from pneumonia. The assignment offered essential care to isolated patients, while providing Mackenzie herself a brief connection with the landscape that had become central to her sense of purpose. The evening before her departure, Mackenzie methodically prepared. Her equipment, her medical bag contained carefully selected supplies for common emergencies: injectable antibiotics, emergency delivery kit, epinephrine, suture materials, glucose monitoring equipment, and a range of medications chosen for versatility in field conditions. Her vehicle, a modified 4-wheel drive with enhanced suspension, specialized tires, and custom storage configurations, was stocked with additional medical supplies, emergency rations, satellite communication equipment, and water purification systems. Mackenzie's preparation reflected years of rural medicine experience and specialized training she had completed through the Rural Emergency Medicine Institute. She maintained wilderness first responder certification and had successfully managed complex medical emergencies in field conditions. By all objective measures, she was exceptionally well equipped and sufficiently experienced for a 3-day circuit through remote communities she knew intimately. What no one could have anticipated, not Mackenzie, not Dr. Mitchell, not even the regional meteorologists, was the catastrophic storm system rapidly forming over the Gulf of California, one that would defy all weather models and sweep across central Arizona with unprecedented fury less than 36 hours later. Mackenzie's last contact with the clinic occurred at 6:43 a.m. on August 12th, when she sent a text message to Taylor. Starting the Northern Circuit, roads passable but showing significant washout near Devil's Canyon, should reach the Watson homestead by midday. We'll check in via satellite tonight. The message delivered. She placed her phone in the waterproof console, checked her route one final time, and began the journey into increasingly remote terrain that would soon become the epicenter of a meteorological catastrophe. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The initial hours of Mackenzie's journey progressed as anticipated. The unpaved Forest Service road, though bearing evidence of recent flooding, remained passable for her specially equipped vehicle. The morning air hung heavy with moisture, the distinctive petrichor scent of recent rainfall permeating everything as steam rose from sun-warmed rocks. Despite the challenging conditions, Mackenzie maintained a steady pace, navigating around washouts and fallen debris with the practiced skill of someone intimately familiar with the region's temperamental terrain. She paused occasionally to document concerning infrastructure damage, a collapsed culvert that threatened to undermine the road completely, a section where a mudslide had reduced passage to barely the width of a single vehicle. These observations she recorded methodically, knowing they would provide critical information for emergency management teams struggling to maintain access to vulnerable communities. By mid-morning, the landscape had transformed from scrubby desert into the pine-dominated ecosystem of higher elevations. Here the temperature dropped noticeably, and evidence of the recent rainfall appeared less catastrophic. Mackenzie allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps the forecasts had been accurate, and this region had indeed been spared the worst of the recent deluge. That optimism evaporated as she rounded a bend to discover a section of road completely washed away, creating a 15-foot gap where a seasonal creek had transformed into a churning torrent. "This wasn't here 3 weeks ago," she murmured, consulting her topographical map to identify potential alternative routes. The detour would add nearly 2 hours to her journey, forcing her through terrain even her modified vehicle would struggle to navigate. She considered turning back, but the thought of Mrs. Watson potentially rationing insulin and the child recovering from pneumonia without proper follow-up care made the decision clear. Mackenzie radioed her position to the clinic, explained her intended detour, and proceeded toward a rarely used logging track that would eventually reconnect with her original route. The detour proved even more challenging than anticipated. Fallen trees, eroded surfaces, and sections where the track disappeared entirely beneath standing water required all her driving skill and occasional use of the vehicle's winch system. By early afternoon, what should have been a routine 4-hour drive had stretched beyond 6, with the Watson homestead still several miles ahead. As Mackenzie navigated the increasingly treacherous terrain, her attention was drawn to a sudden movement along the roadside, a flash of color incongruous against the natural landscape. Slowing the vehicle, she spotted what appeared to be a hand-woven blanket in distinctive Apache patterns draped over a juniper branch. This deliberate placement, Couldn't be accidental. In these remote areas, such markers often served as distress signals within indigenous communities. Following established protocol for such discoveries, Mackenzie stopped her vehicle, exited with her medical bag, and called out in both English and the Apache phrases she had learned. "Hello, is anyone there? Do you need medical help?" The response came not as a voice, but as another movement. A young woman emerging shakily from behind a large boulder, approximately 30 yards from the road. Even from this distance, Mackenzie immediately recognized the advanced pregnancy and distress signals in her posture and movement. The woman, who appeared to be in her early 20s, was supporting her abdomen with both hands, her face contorted in an unmistakable expression of labor pain. Mackenzie moved quickly toward her, professional assessment already cataloging critical details. The woman's soaked clothing, her unsteady gait, the pallor visible beneath her copper complexion, and most alarmingly, the streaks of blood visible on her dress below the pronounced belly. "I'm Dr. Hayes," Mackenzie said as she approached, keeping her voice calm while using simple, clear language. "I'm a doctor. Can I help you?" The young woman nodded, then grimaced as another contraction visibly tensed her body. "Baby coming?" She managed between controlled breaths. "Started yesterday. Water broke. Road gone behind us." "What's your name?" Mackenzie asked, gently guiding the woman to sit on a fallen log while she began basic assessment. Pulse rapid but strong. Respiration elevated but not dangerous. No immediately visible trauma beyond the expected labor presentation. "Sarah," she replied. "Sarah Whitefeather, from San Carlos." She gestured vaguely eastward, indicating her community's location nearly 40 miles distant. "Was visiting cousin in Mesa, trying to get home when roads started washing out." As Mackenzie checked the woman's blood pressure with her portable cuff, Sarah gasped and doubled forward. "Contractions very close," Mackenzie observed, noting their pattern and Sarah's response. "How far apart have they been?" "Minutes only now," Sarah confirmed, her composure remarkable despite the circumstances. "And there's two." "Two," Mackenzie clarified, her assessment immediately shifting to account for a twin pregnancy. Sarah nodded. "Twins. They knew at the clinic was supposed to deliver at hospital next week." This information transformed the already serious situation into a potential emergency. Twin deliveries carried additional complications under ideal circumstances. In field conditions during deteriorating weather, the risks multiplied exponentially. Mackenzie made rapid calculations, the nearest hospital now unreachable, given the road conditions she'd already encountered, her vehicle perhaps able to reach the Watson homestead with careful navigation. But risking a delivery in transit seemed dangerously unwise. "Sarah, I need to check how far along you are," Mackenzie explained, maintaining the direct but respectful communication style she'd found most effective with her Apache patients. "Is that okay?" Sarah nodded, another contraction preventing verbal response. The examination confirmed Mackenzie's suspicion. Delivery was imminent, with the first twin already engaged in the birth canal. This wasn't a situation that allowed for transportation. They needed immediate shelter and delivery conditions as controlled as possible, given the circumstances. "You're going to deliver very soon," Mackenzie explained, helping Sarah back into a supported sitting position. "Do you know of any shelter nearby? Any cabin or structure we could use?" Sarah pointed toward a pine-covered ridge approximately half a mile distant. "Old fire watcher's cabin. My cousin showed me once. Should be there." This slim chance of proper shelter catalyzed Mackenzie's decision-making. A controlled environment, even a rudimentary one, would dramatically improve outcomes, compared to an outdoor delivery in deteriorating weather. "We'll go there," she determined. "My vehicle can get us close, and I'll help you the rest of the way." The journey to the vehicle and then along the barely discernible track toward the ridge tested both women's endurance. Sarah breathed through increasingly frequent contractions, while Mackenzie navigated terrain that threatened to halt their progress with each turn. The sky had darkened ominously, not merely from the late afternoon hour, but from the approach of weather systems visible as towering thunderheads on the southwestern horizon. The cabin, when they finally reached it, proved both better and worse than Mackenzie had feared. Structurally sound, with intact roof and walls, it had clearly been abandoned for years. Dust covered every surface, small animal droppings indicated multiple inhabitants, and the single room contained only a rusted metal frame bed, a wood stove of dubious functionality, and a rough-hewn table. Not ideal, but we can work with this, Mackenzie assessed aloud, helping Sarah to the bed while retrieving emergency supplies from her vehicle. Clean blankets from her emergency kit, sterile delivery supplies, bottled water, and the portable LED lanterns that would prove crucial as daylight faded. Within 20 minutes, Mackenzie had transformed the space as effectively as circumstances allowed. Clean blankets covered the bed and floor beneath it, creating a delivery area more sanitary than the bare surfaces. Her medical supplies were arranged for immediate access, bottled water prepared for both hydration and cleaning, and the lanterns positioned to provide optimal visibility. Sarah's labor had progressed rapidly during this preparation, her contractions now virtually continuous. Mackenzie positioned herself to assist, her training and experience guiding her actions while she maintained a calm narrative of encouragement and instruction. "You're doing perfectly, Sarah," she assured her. "I can see the baby's head. On the next contraction, I need you to push just as you're doing." Sarah nodded, gathering her strength before bearing down with remarkable focus. The first twin's head emerged fully, Mackenzie supporting it while checking for the umbilical cord around. The neck, finding none, she prepared for the shoulders. "One more strong push," she directed, and Sarah complied with extraordinary determination. The first twin emerged completely, a boy, small but well-formed, his newborn cry piercing the cabin as Mackenzie swiftly cleared his airways and placed him on Sarah's chest while managing the umbilical cord. "Your son," Mackenzie announced, allowing just a moment of connection before the medical realities of twin delivery reclaimed priority. "He looks healthy, but we need to focus on the second baby now." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on her son's face with an expression of wonder that transcended the difficult circumstances. This momentary peace shattered as she gasped, her body contorting with renewed intensity. The second delivery progressed more rapidly, but with a complication Mackenzie identified immediately. This twin presented in breech position, feet first, rather than the safer head-first delivery. Drawing on specialized training for this scenario, she adjusted her approach, providing targeted guidance to Sarah while using gentle manipulation techniques to assist the baby's passage. "This is more challenging, but you're doing everything right," she assured Sarah, whose strength seemed to be flagging. "I need the strongest push you can give me when I count to 3. Sarah summoned remarkable reserves of determination, following Mackenzie's instructions with precise cooperation despite her exhaustion. The second twin, a girl, emerged completely, but without the reassuring cry of her brother. Mackenzie moved with practiced efficiency, stimulating the infant's breathing response while clearing airways and monitoring vital signs. Tense seconds passed before the baby girl finally gasped and then wailed, her cry weaker than her brother's, but present, a sound that released the breath Mackenzie hadn't realized she was holding. "Your daughter," she announced, placing the second twin beside her brother on Sarah's chest, both here and fighting. Outside the cabin, the first heavy raindrops began striking the metal roof, harbingers of the catastrophic storm about to engulf them. But within the transformed space, Sarah Whitefeather gazed at her newborn twins with a mixture of exhaustion and transcendent joy, unaware that the most dangerous hours still lay ahead. as Mackenzie secured both umbilical cords and prepared to deliver the placentas. She noticed the first alarming sign: Sarah's blood loss exceeding normal parameters. Her already challenged vital signs beginning to deteriorate in ways that would severely test the limits of field medicine in the hours to come. The full intensity of what meteorologists would later name the monsoon maximus descended upon the Superstition Mountains with apocalyptic force. Weather stations throughout central Arizona failed one after another as wind gusts exceeded 70 mph, tearing down power lines and communication towers. In Phoenix, emergency services responded to over 30 flash flood incidents within the first 6 hours. Governor Richards declared a state emergency by noon on August 13th, mobilizing National Guard units that would ultimately remain helpless against nature's fury. For Mackenzie Hayes, these broader impacts remained unknown. Her world had contracted to the confines of the firewatcher's cabin, where every resource of medical knowledge and improvised care focused on keeping 3 lives intact against multiplying threats. Sarah Whitefeather's post-delivery hemorrhage had escalated from concerning to critical within 30 minutes of the twins' birth. "I need you to stay with me, Sarah," Mackenzie urged, administering the emergency dose of oxytocin she carried specifically for postpartum hemorrhage while applying the manual compression techniques to control the bleeding. "Your babies need you. Focus on my voice." Sarah's eyes, increasingly unfocused as her blood pressure dropped, struggled to maintain contact with Mackenzie's. "Take care of them," she whispered, her fingers weakly gesturing toward the newborns, who lay swaddled in emergency thermal blankets atop a makeshift nest Mackenzie had created from her own jacket. "We're going to take care of all of you," Mackenzie insisted, continuing compression while monitoring the slowing blood flow. "But I need your help. Tell me about your family. Who should know about these beautiful twins?" This question served dual purposes: maintaining Sarah's consciousness through engaged conversation while gathering critical information should her condition worsen. The medical reality was stark. Without surgical intervention or blood transfusion capabilities, Mackenzie's options for treating catastrophic hemorrhage were severely limited. "My brother, Gabriel," Sarah responded, each word requiring visible effort. "He's a healer in San Carlos. Our grandmother teaches him old ways." Her breathing had become shallow, her naturally warm copper complexion now ashen. "Parents died. Car accident. 3 years ago. Gabriel raised me after." Mackenzie nodded encouragingly while continuing treatment, noting that the bleeding had begun to respond to the combination of medication and compression techniques. "Gabriel will be so proud of you and these babies. What are their names?" The question sparked a momentary strengthening in Sarah's focus. "Boy is Michael, after our father. Girl," she paused, gathering energy, "is Luna, for the moon she was born under." Outside, thunder crashed with concussive force as the storm intensified, rain now pounding the cabin roof with such violence that conversation required increased volume. The cabin's structural integrity, initially a relief, now revealed limitations. Water beginning to seep through aging roof seams, wind forcing its way through gaps in the walls, and temperature dropping precipitously as the storm's cold front collided with the region's ambient warmth. Mackenzie faced compounding challenges that expanded beyond Sarah's medical crisis. The twins, though remarkably healthy considering their premature arrival, required careful temperature regulation that the deteriorating cabin conditions threatened. With Sarah stabilized but still critically weak, Mackenzie turned her attention to environmental control. The cabin's wood stove, initially dismissed as unreliable, now represented their best hope for heat. A quick inspection revealed it structurally sound, despite its rusted appearance, with a chimney that remained unobstructed. Using emergency fire-starting supplies from her vehicle, Mackenzie carefully built and lit a fire using the driest wood. She could locate from a small stack beside the stove. "We need to maintain your body temperature," she explained to Sarah while working. "Hypothermia would complicate your recovery, and the babies need consistent warmth." The medical language provided reassurance through professional confidence while avoiding the more frightening reality that without this heat source, survival chances for all 3 patients would diminish dramatically as night approached. The stove reluctantly sputtered to life, initially producing more smoke than heat, until Mackenzie adjusted the flue and feeding pattern. As modest warmth began radiating through the cabin, she conducted another assessment of Sarah's condition. The bleeding had reduced to manageable levels, but blood loss remained a critical concern. Without measurement tools, Mackenzie estimated, Sarah had lost nearly 30% of her blood volume, approaching but not quite reaching the threshold for hypovolemic shock. "I need to get fluids into you," Mackenzie explained, preparing an oral rehydration solution from medical supplies. "Small sips, but as consistent as you can manage." Sarah complied with remarkable determination, each swallow visibly requiring effort, but delivered with the same focused resolve she had demonstrated during delivery. Meanwhile, the twins, Michael stronger than his sister Luna, began showing signs of hunger. "They need to feed," Sarah whispered, attempting to adjust her position despite profound weakness. "Let me help you," Mackenzie responded, gently assisting Sarah into a modified side-lying position that would allow breastfeeding while minimizing exertion. This position reduces your energy expenditure while allowing them to nurse. What followed demonstrated the innate power of maternal instinct transcending physical limitation. Despite her critical condition, Sarah guided first Michael and then Luna to her breast with instinctive expertise. The successful first feeding represented a crucial milestone for newborn health, while providing essential hormonal stimulation to help control Sarah's hemorrhage. While mother and babies engaged in this primal bonding, Mackenzie turned her attention to their deteriorating shelter situation. Water now leaked through multiple points in the roof, creating dangerous conditions both for hypothermia risk and potential infection exposure for her medically vulnerable patients. Using emergency supplies and items scavenged from the cabin, Mackenzie engineered a series of collection and diversion systems for the water, plastic sheeting from her emergency kit arranged to channel leaks away from the bed area, collection containers positioned to capture water for potential purification if their bottled supplies ran low, and strategic placement of remaining dry materials to insulate the floor around their position. These efforts, while effective in addressing immediate shelter challenges, consumed precious resources from Mackenzie's emergency supplies. Mental inventory calculations revealed increasingly concerning projections. At current consumption rates, their medical supplies would last approximately 72 hours, with food and water reserves extending perhaps 96 hours with careful rationing. The satellite phone, their potential lifeline to emergency services, had failed to connect despite multiple attempts. The topographical features of their location, combined with the storm's electromagnetic interference, created a communication dead zone that isolated them as completely as if they had been on another planet. As darkness fell on the first night, the storm showed no signs of abating. Wind gusts now exceeded 80 mph, producing an otherworldly howling as they tore through the surrounding forest. Periodic crashes indicated trees succumbing to the combination of saturated soil and wind stress, each one potentially blocking already compromised roads more completely. In Cooper Springs, Emergency management officials had been forced to suspend even limited search operations for anyone reported missing in the backcountry. Dr. Taylor Mitchell maintained constant communication with the Regional Emergency Operations Center, where meteorologists now predicted storm conditions could persist for up to 5 days, far beyond the window Mackenzie had planned for her routine patient visits. "We have to assume she's sheltering in place," the emergency management coordinator had told Taylor when she reported Mackenzie's failure to check in at the scheduled time. "Hayes knows wilderness protocol and has supplies for extended field conditions. Attempting search operations under current conditions would only create additional casualties." Taylor had reluctantly accepted this assessment, knowing it was correctly prioritized from an emergency management perspective while feeling personally torn about her friend's unknown status. "If anyone can handle whatever's happening out there, it's Mackenzie," she assured the clinic staff, words meant as much for her own reassurance as theirs. Unknown to Taylor, Dr. Mitchell, or indeed anyone searching for either woman, Mackenzie, Hayes and Sarah Whitefeather were engaged in a struggle that transcended conventional wilderness emergency scenarios. The combination of critical postpartum hemorrhage, premature twins, catastrophic weather conditions, and complete isolation had created a survival situation without precedent in either woman's experience or training. As midnight approached on that first harrowing night, Mackenzie conducted another assessment of Sarah's condition. The bleeding had stabilized, but blood pressure remained dangerously low, and temperature had begun dropping despite the stove's heat. Early signs of the body's struggle with significant blood loss. "I need to try something that combines our approaches," Mackenzie explained, removing several items from her medical bag while heating water in a small pot on the wood stove. "In medical school, we're taught pharmaceutical interventions for blood loss, but your people have plant-based methods that can be equally effective for certain conditions." Sarah's eyes widened slightly with recognition. "My grandmother uses those," she whispered, identifying the herbs Mackenzie had extracted from a specialized compartment in her medical bag. Shepherd's purse and yarrow, traditional hemorrhage. Treatments used by both indigenous healers and evidence supported by modern research for their hemostatic properties. "I've studied with several traditional healers from your community," Mackenzie explained while preparing the infusion. "They taught me when these can help alongside conventional treatments." This represented the integrated medical approach that had defined Mackenzie's rural practice, recognizing value in multiple healing traditions while maintaining scientific discernment about appropriate applications. While the herbal infusion steeped, Mackenzie checked the twins who had fallen asleep after feeding. Their color remained good, breathing regular though slightly rapid and temperature stable, all positive indicators despite their premature status. Michael, the firstborn, displayed remarkable vigor for his circumstance, while Luna required slightly more careful positioning to maintain optimal breathing. "They're doing wonderfully," Mackenzie assured Sarah, whose gaze remained fixed on her. Children with the particular intensity of a mother aware of her potentially limited time with them. "You've given them everything they need so far. Now we need to focus on getting you stronger." The herbal treatment, combined with continued conventional management, produced noticeable improvement in Sarah's condition by early morning. Her blood pressure stabilized slightly above critical levels, and her mental clarity improved enough for more substantive conversation. "My brother will come," she stated with certainty that transcended her physical weakness. "Gabriel knows these mountains, knows when family needs him. When the storm allows search operations, I'm sure they'll find us," Mackenzie agreed, carefully monitoring Sarah's vital signs while replacing soaked cloths with dry alternatives from her dwindling supply. Sarah shook her head slightly. "Not talking about official search. Gabriel follows different signs. Our grandmother taught him to track through storms, find family across any distance. This assertion would have seemed like delirium or desperate hope coming from many patients. But Mackenzie had witnessed enough of traditional Apache practices to withhold judgment. The connection between family members described by many indigenous elders sometimes manifested in ways that defied conventional explanation. Locations found without logical tracking methods, dangers sensed across impossible distances, healing occurring through ceremonial interventions when modern medicine had exhausted options. Before Mackenzie could explore this further, Luna began showing signs of respiratory distress, subtle but immediately concerning to trained medical observation. Her breathing had become more labored, with slight retractions visible between her ribs and nostrils, flaring with each breath. The tenuous stability they had achieved now faced a new crisis: neonatal respiratory distress syndrome, a common but potentially life-threatening complication in premature infants, was developing in the most vulnerable of her 3 patients. Dawn of August 14th brought no respite from the storm, but illuminated the full extent of Mackenzie's newest challenge. Luna's respiratory distress had progressed through the night, despite Mackenzie's interventions, which had included careful positioning, gentle suctioning of her airways, and monitoring through the rudimentary tools available. The newborn's breathing had become increasingly labored, with concerning color changes visible around her lips and nail beds, early signs of insufficient oxygenation. In a hospital setting, Luna would have been immediately placed in a neonatal intensive care unit with supplemental oxygen, continuous monitoring, and potentially mechanical ventilation. Here, in an aging cabin while a historic storm raged outside, Mackenzie faced the need to create life-sustaining interventions from severely limited resources. Her lungs are underdeveloped, Mackenzie explained to Sarah, whose own medical condition remained precarious but had stabilized enough to understand the situation. Premature babies often struggle with this. Their lungs haven't produced enough surfactant, a substance that helps the air sacs stay open properly. Sarah listened with the intense focus of a mother transcending her own physical distress, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. "What can we do?" she asked simply, the question containing both profound trust in Mackenzie's capabilities and acknowledgement of their desperate circumstances. Mackenzie's mind raced through her medical training, searching for applicable interventions that could be adapted to their extreme limitations. "I'm going to create a makeshift CPAP," she decided, referring to the continuous positive airway pressure system commonly used for respiratory support. "It won't be as effective as hospital equipment, but it might provide enough support until her lungs strengthen or help arrives." This declaration initiated what Mackenzie would later describe as the most intensive improvisational medicine of her career. Using the oxygen mask and bag from her emergency kit, designed for adult resuscitation, she began modifying components to create a scaled-down system appropriate for a newborn. The process required delicate adjustment of the one-way valve mechanism, creative repurposing of tubing, and fabrication of a newborn-sized mask from sterile packaging materials. In medical school, they teach standardized approaches with proper equipment, Mackenzie explained while working, her narration providing both distraction and education for Sarah. "In rural medicine, we learn to adapt principles rather than protocols. Understanding the why behind interventions becomes more important than following exact procedures." This philosophy, adaptation guided by foundational principles rather than rigid adherence to conventional methods, reflected Mackenzie's entire approach to rural healthcare. Now it would be tested at its most extreme as she completed the makeshift breathing system and prepared to implement it for Luna. "I need to be honest with you," Mackenzie told Sarah as she finished the final adjustments. "This is experimental. It might help her breathing, but it carries risks too. Without monitoring equipment, we'll need to watch her responses very carefully. Sarah nodded, her expression revealing complete understanding of both the risks and the absence of alternatives. "Do what you must," she said simply. "I trust your hands." The implementation proceeded with painstaking care. Mackenzie positioned Luna to optimize airway alignment, then gently applied the modified mask, securing it with adapted strapping that maintained proper pressure without risking skin damage. The manual pumping mechanism required precise rhythm and pressure. Too little would provide insufficient support, while too much could damage the infant's delicate lungs. "I'll need to show you how to continue this if I need to attend to other things," Mackenzie explained, demonstrating the technique while monitoring Luna's immediate response. "It's like creating a pattern with your hands. Consistent pressure, regular rhythm, watching for her chest to rise just this much with each breath." Sarah observed with unwavering attention, her focus reminiscent of traditional learning methods Mackenzie had witnessed among tribal elders teaching crucial skills to younger generations, learning through silent observation before attempting replication. Despite her weakened condition, Sarah's hands proved steady when given the opportunity to provide this critical support for her daughter. "You have healing hands," Mackenzie observed, watching Sarah maintain the precisely calibrated rhythm that was already producing visible improvement in Luna's color. "Many of my medical colleagues would struggle to maintain that level of consistency." A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips. "My grandmother says our family has carried healing through 7 generations," she replied, her voice stronger than it had been since the birth. "Even before the hospitals came, white feather women helped bring babies into the world." This connection between Sarah's heritage and their current crisis created a momentary bridge across cultural differences, highlighting the fundamental commonality of their shared goal, sustaining life against overwhelming odds. The cabin, initially a mere shelter of necessity, had transformed into a space where 2 distinct healing traditions converged through desperate innovation. By midday, this improvised respiratory support had stabilized Luna's condition sufficiently for Mackenzie to turn attention to their deteriorating shelter situation. The storm's unrelenting assault had worsened with wind-driven rain, now penetrating multiple points in the cabin's aging structure. Water pooled in expanding areas of the floor, threatening both hygiene for the newborns and thermal regulation for all occupants. Using emergency supplies combined with materials scavenged from less critical areas of the cabin, Mackenzie constructed a protective enclosure around the bed where Sarah and the twins remained. Thermal blankets from her medical kit formed the primary barrier, supported by cordage threaded through existing wall features. The structure resembled a tent within the cabin, a microenvironment where temperature and humidity could be better controlled while protecting the patients from direct water exposure. "It's like a wilderness incubator," Mackenzie explained as she completed the structure, trying to normalize the extraordinary adaptations through familiar medical terminology. "We're creating a controlled microclimate similar to what we'd use for premature infants in hospital settings." The improvisation proved immediately beneficial, creating noticeable temperature stabilization within the protected space. With this critical shelter improvement completed, Mackenzie conducted another comprehensive assessment of all 3 patients. Sarah's condition showed concerning patterns. While the bleeding had remained controlled, the significant blood loss had left her severely weakened, with early signs of infection developing, despite Mackenzie's careful preventive measures. Her temperature had begun rising slowly but steadily, the classic indicator of postpartum infection that could rapidly become life-threatening without appropriate antibiotic intervention. Mackenzie administered injectable antibiotics from her Emergency supplies, a broad-spectrum approach designed for field treatment of serious infections. This should help control the infection, she explained while preparing the injection. But we need to closely monitor how you respond. Michael, the firstborn twin, continued displaying remarkable resilience. His breathing remained strong, temperature stable, and feeding robust whenever Sarah managed to position him at her breast. Luna, while stabilized by the improvised respiratory support, required constant vigilance to maintain adequate breathing assistance. The siblings' divergent responses to their premature birth created a striking study in individual resilience factors that transcended medical explanation. As afternoon progressed toward another dangerous night, Mackenzie faced increasingly complex logistical challenges. The cabin's wood supply, critical for maintaining livable temperatures, would last approximately 36 more hours at current consumption rates. Their clean water reserves, while supplemented by captured rainwater that Mackenzie purified using filtration equipment from her kit, required careful rationing. Most concerning, the medical supplies needed for Luna's respiratory support and Sarah's infection management were being consumed at rates that would exhaust critical components within 48 to 72 hours. These resource calculations occupied Mackenzie's thoughts as she melted snow for additional water, her mind simultaneously tracking patient care needs and survival logistics with the compartmentalized focus characteristic of experienced emergency physicians. The mental triage extended beyond immediate medical concerns to psychological support for Sarah, whose profound physical challenges were compounded by the emotional weight of watching her newborn struggle for every breath. "Tell me about your brother," Mackenzie suggested during a moment when both twins were sleeping and Sarah seemed most alert. "You mentioned Gabriel is a healer." The question served multiple purposes: assessing Sarah's cognitive status, providing psychological distraction from their dire circumstances, and gathering potentially useful information about family who might be searching for them. Sarah's response revealed not only clear mental functioning, but access to cultural knowledge that would prove unexpectedly valuable. "Gabriel walks between worlds," Sarah explained, her voice strengthening when discussing her brother. "Trained in traditional medicine with our grandmother since he was 7, works at the tribal health clinic too, went to school as a physician assistant, but practices both ways." A spark of pride animated her features despite her exhaustion. "People come from 3 states to consult him when modern doctors have no more answers." This description resonated with Mackenzie's own integrated approach to medicine, though apparently Gabriel's training in traditional methods went far deeper than her own supplementary knowledge. "What would he suggest for Luna's breathing?" she asked, genuinely curious, while also keeping Sarah engaged. Sarah's eyes closed briefly, as if accessing inherited knowledge despite her weakened state. "Cedar smoke," she finally answered. "Not directly, but in the space around her. The old ones say it strengthens small lungs and drives away spirits that steal breath." Under normal circumstances, Mackenzie might have mentally categorized such information as culturally significant, but medically unproven. Her current situation, however, had pushed beyond conventional medical boundaries into territory where multiple knowledge systems might offer valid approaches. The potential antimicrobial properties of cedar had some scientific basis, and the ritualized approach to its use might provide psychological benefits for both mother and practitioner. "There's cedar growing near the cabin," Mackenzie noted, having identified various local plants during her initial assessment of their surroundings. "If you think it might help, I could try incorporating it alongside our current approach." This openness to integrating traditional methods alongside conventional care represented the natural evolution of Mackenzie's medical philosophy under extreme circumstances, not abandoning evidence-based practice, but expanding potential resources beyond conventional limitations. Sarah's response demonstrated similar integration of seemingly separate knowledge systems. "My brother would say, use both paths," she confirmed, briefly touching Luna's cheek with gentle fingers. Medicine Wheel teaches that healing comes from all directions. As darkness approached on their second night, Mackenzie implemented this integrated approach. While maintaining the improvised CPAP system, she carefully introduced small amounts of cedar smoke into the cabin's atmosphere, using techniques Sarah described that minimized direct exposure while allowing the aromatic compounds to permeate their space. Whether through physiological effect, psychological benefit, or mere coincidence, Luna's breathing pattern showed subtle improvement over the following hours. This positive development coincided with a concerning deterioration in Sarah's condition. Despite antibiotic treatment, her fever had increased steadily through the evening, now reaching levels that indicated the infection was advancing despite intervention. Her consciousness began fluctuating between periods of clarity and concerning confusion, early indications of potential sepsis developing from the postpartum infection. "Stay with me, Sarah," Mackenzie urged during a lucid moment, administering the remaining dose of her most powerful injectable antibiotic. "The twins need you. I need you. We're going to get through this together." Sarah's response revealed both her awareness of her declining condition and her primary concern. "If I don't survive," she whispered, fixing Mackenzie with an intense gaze, "promise they'll reach Gabriel. He'll raise them in our ways, teach them who they are." The request crystallized their shared, unspoken understanding of Sarah's deteriorating medical status, while establishing a profound trust that transcended their brief acquaintance. "I promise," Mackenzie responded, the commitment extending beyond professional responsibility into personal covenant. "But we're fighting for a different outcome. I'm not giving up, and neither should you." As Sarah drifted into fevered sleep, Mackenzie faced the stark reality that conventional medical interventions within her limited resources had reached their effective boundaries. The antibiotics, while appropriate, had proven insufficient against the aggressive infection. Without intravenous fluids, additional medication options, or surgical intervention capabilities, Sarah's survival now depended on factors beyond standard medical control. In this moment of medical limitation, Mackenzie made a decision that bridged her professional training and the wisdom Sarah had shared. Retrieving her satellite phone, still unable to connect for communication but containing stored information, she accessed files from her previous work with tribal healers. These included detailed notes on traditional treatments for post-birth infections, ceremonial approaches to supporting struggling mothers, and specific plant combinations considered especially potent by Apache healers. As the storm continued its relentless assault on their shelter, Mackenzie Hayes, trained in the most rigorous traditions of Western medicine, began carefully implementing healing practices that predated modern antibiotics by thousands of years. This adaptation, neither abandoning her medical training nor dismissing traditional knowledge, represented the evolution of her approach under the most extreme circumstances imaginable, whether through measurable physiological effects, psychological components influencing immune response, or elements not yet recognized by conventional medicine. Sarah's fever began to stabilize in the early hours before dawn. The improvement, while modest, interrupted what had appeared to be an irreversible decline. The morning of August 15th marked the third day of their ordeal, bringing the first subtle signs of the storm's diminishing fury. Though rain continued falling heavily, the apocalyptic wind gusts had decreased from over 80 millimeters to a still dangerous but less catastrophic 50 millimeters. These improving conditions coincided with a critical transformation in their shared experience, not merely survival adaptations, but fundamental shifts in how both Mackenzie and Sarah perceived their situation and each other. For Mackenzie, the transformation emerged from necessity's crucible. Her conventional medical training, while providing essential foundations, had been systematically supplemented by improvisation, integration of traditional knowledge, and intuitive responses that transcended textbook protocols. She found herself operating in what anthropologists might term a liminal space between knowledge systems, neither abandoning evidence-based practice nor hesitating to incorporate approaches that Western medicine typically dismissed. "I think the infection is responding," Mackenzie noted during her morning assessment of Sarah's condition. The young mother's fever had plateaued rather than continuing its alarming climb, and her periods of lucidity had lengthened during the night. While still dangerously ill, the trajectory had shifted from precipitous decline to tenuous stability. "The implants help," Sarah confirmed, her voice weak but clear. "My grandmother says healing comes when we listen to both the microscope and the mountain." This poetic articulation captured precisely what was evolving in Mackenzie's approach, a balanced integration that respected both the microscopic precision of modern medicine and the ecological wisdom accumulated through generations of traditional practice. The transformation wasn't abandoning her training, but expanding it beyond institutional boundaries. Sarah's own transformation manifested differently. Despite profound physical weakness, she had developed remarkable adaptations to their circumstances. Her positioning adjustments for the twins reflected intuitive understanding of their needs, subtle shifts that optimized breathing for Luna or digestive comfort for Michael. Her ability to maintain the precise rhythm needed for Luna's respiratory support had improved despite her weakened state, displaying a mind-body coordination that transcended her medical condition. Most significantly, Sarah had begun transferring cultural knowledge with the focused intensity of someone aware they might not survive to complete the teaching. During periods when both twins slept, she shared critical information about Apache traditions surrounding newborns, naming ceremonies that would need to be conducted, protective practices for their developmental stages, and family connections that should be maintained. "Luna must have moccasin blessing at first new moon after birth," she explained, each cultural transmission delivered with the deliberate precision of sacred instruction. "Michael needs eagle feather kept above where he sleeps until he takes first steps. My grandmother has these things." Mackenzie documented these instructions carefully, understanding their cultural significance transcended mere tradition to form essential components of the twins' identities. In recording these details with medical precision, Mackenzie found herself transformed from physician to cultural witness, a role she had never anticipated, but now embraced as necessary extension of her care responsibilities. The twins themselves demonstrated remarkable adaptations to their challenging introduction to life. Michael continued showing extraordinary resilience, his breathing, temperature regulation, and feeding responses consistently strong despite premature birth in wilderness conditions. Luna, while still requiring respiratory assistance, had stabilized. With the combined conventional and traditional approaches, her color had improved, and periods of respiratory distress had decreased in both frequency and duration. "They're teaching us about resilience," Mackenzie observed, while checking Luna's vital signs. "Born into a storm, yet finding ways to thrive." Sarah nodded, momentarily touching each twin's cheek in a gesture that conveyed both blessing and connection. "Apache babies are born strong," she whispered. "Our ancestors made sure only the toughest survived the hardest times." This reference to historical resilience carried profound resonance in their current crisis. The twins weren't merely surviving against medical odds, but manifesting ancestral strength that connected them to generations who had endured similarly extreme circumstances. The perspective transformed their precarious situation from isolated medical emergency to continuation of historical endurance. By midday, Mackenzie faced increasingly critical resource limitations. The antibiotic supply had been exhausted, with only basic analgesics and antipyretics remaining. Clean dressing materials for Sarah's postpartum care had been reduced to carefully sterilized repurposing of available fabrics. Most concerning, the components of Luna's improvised respiratory support system were showing signs of deterioration from constant use. These limitations necessitated another adaptive transformation in Mackenzie's approach. Rather than focusing on what conventional resources were lacking, she systematically assessed what environmental assets remained available. This shift from deficiency orientation to resource recognition represented a fundamental change in problem-solving methodology, one that aligned more closely with indigenous approaches to challenge. I need to gather more cedar and check what other medicinal plants might be growing nearby, Mackenzie explained, preparing for her first extended departure from the cabin. The storm's intensity has decreased enough to make a quick exploration. Impossible, Sarah nodded, understanding the necessity while clearly concerned about temporary separation. Look for pine resin too, she suggested. My grandmother uses it for healing wounds and breathing sickness. This simple exchange demonstrated their evolved relationship, a partnership of complementary knowledge rather than provider and patient. Mackenzie's medical expertise was now being naturally supplemented by Sarah's cultural knowledge, creating an integrated approach neither could have implemented alone. Venturing outside for the first time in nearly 72 hours, Mackenzie confronted her transformed landscape. The forest surrounding the cabin had been fundamentally altered by the storm's fury. Dozens of pines lay uprooted or broken, creating a maze of fallen timber. Seasonal creeks had become raging waterways, cutting new channels through what had previously been solid ground. The road that had barely been passable before the storm was now completely obliterated in multiple sections, visible from the cabin's position. Rather than seeing only destruction, Mackenzie assessed these changes through the lens of potential resources. Fallen trees provided access to resin that would have been difficult to harvest otherwise. New water channels offered information about topographical drainage that might indicate search patterns rescue teams would eventually implement. Even the transformed acoustics of the altered forest, sound traveling differently through the reconfigured spaces, provided orientation data that helped map their position relative to potential assistance routes. During her circumscribed exploration, Mackenzie located several plant species she recognized from her studies with tribal healers, most notably a patch of osha root, considered particularly valuable for respiratory conditions by multiple indigenous traditions. She harvested these finds with the respectful practices she had been taught, offering thanks and taking only what was needed rather than maximum possible quantities. Returning to the cabin with these gathered resources, Mackenzie found Sarah engaged in what could only be described as ceremonial communication with the twins. Though weakened by infection and blood loss, she had positioned herself to address them in her native language, the musical Apache syllables flowing in rhythmic patterns that suggested formal blessing rather than casual speech. Sarah paused upon Mackenzie's entry, then explained, telling them their lineage, 7 generations back, so they know who they come from. The simple statement contained profound cultural significance, identity formation beginning literally from birth through connection to ancestral continuity. This glimpse of traditional practice transformed Mackenzie's understanding of perinatal care beyond medical parameters. In her conventional training, newborn care focused exclusively on physiological needs. Here she witnessed identity formation and cultural transmission occurring simultaneously with physical healing, an integrated approach that addressed beings rather than merely bodies. As Mackenzie prepared the newly gathered natural materials, according to Sarah's guidance, their collaborative process reflected the transformative integration now defining their approach. Mackenzie's precise measurement and preparation techniques derived from pharmacological training combined with Sarah's knowledge of traditional preparation methods. The resulting treatments, a pine resin salve for Sarah's healing tissues, cedar, and Osha preparations for Luna's respiratory support, represented neither purely conventional nor traditional medicine, but an emergent integration of both knowledge systems. The implementation of these treatments coincided with a noticeable improvement in Sarah's condition. Her fever began decreasing for the first time since the infection had developed, and her strength showed subtle but consistent improvement. Whether through pharmacological properties of the plant materials, psychological benefits of culturally resonant care, or combination of multiple factors, the integrated approach was yielding measurable positive results. "My brother would approve," Sarah noted with the first genuine smile Mackenzie had seen since their initial meeting. "Gabriel always says good medicine needs both the laboratory and the sacred mountain." This observation catalyzed Mackenzie's deepening realization. Her medical education had excelled at teaching the laboratory, but had never acknowledged the mountain. The traditional knowledge Sarah shared wasn't opposed to evidence-based practice, but complemented it by addressing dimensions of healing that technological medicine often overlooked. The transformation in Mackenzie's approach wasn't abandoning science, but expanding its contextual application to include wisdom derived from millennia of observational practice. As evening approached, another transformation became evident, one in their environmental conditions. The storm, while still present, had diminished significantly from its catastrophic peak. Rainfall had reduced to steady but manageable levels, and wind speeds had decreased to below 30 mph. These improving conditions coincided with the first successful connection of Mackenzie's satellite phone, though the signal remained too weak for voice communication. "I've managed to send our GPS coordinates as a text message," Mackenzie explained, the momentary connection representing their first contact with the outside world in over 72 hours. "No confirmation of receipt, but if it went through search, teams will at least have our location." Sarah received this news with complex emotions visible on her face. Hope for essential medical intervention mingled with apparent concern about the approaching transition. "When people come," she asked hesitantly, "will they understand about the twins' needs, about our ways?" The question revealed Sarah's fundamental concern, not merely survival, but cultural continuity for her children. This priority, maintained even through life-threatening conditions, demonstrated values that transcended individual preservation to encompass generational identity maintenance. "I'll make sure they understand," Mackenzie promised, the commitment extending beyond medical advocacy to cultural respect. "Everything you've shared about their care and traditions will be honored." This exchange crystallized perhaps the most profound transformation in their shared experience, Mackenzie's evolution from medical provider to cultural witness and advocate. Her responsibility had expanded beyond physiological care to include protection of traditional knowledge and practices essential to her patients' complete well-being. As night fell on their third day together, both women sensed an approaching transition. The improving weather conditions, combined with the transmitted coordinates, made eventual rescue increasingly likely. Yet this approaching resolution carried uncertainty. separation from the intimate space where their integrated care approach had developed, re-entry into systems that might not respect the delicate balance they had achieved between knowledge, traditions. "No matter what happens," Sarah said as Mackenzie checked the twins' vital signs before they settled for the night, "you are family now. You brought my children into the world when both earth and sky tried to prevent it. Apache tradition says this makes you their second mother." This simple declaration, connecting their medical crisis to cultural framework with profound implications, represented the culmination of Mackenzie's transformation. She had entered the situation as a physician responding to medical emergency. Without relinquishing that role or its responsibilities, she had been incorporated into a cultural understanding that recognized dimensions of connection transcending professional boundaries. "I'm honored," Mackenzie responded, the simple acknowledgement inadequate to express the significance of this inclusion. "And I take that responsibility seriously." As moonlight occasionally penetrated the thinning storm clouds, casting momentary silver illumination through the cabin's window, both women understood that regardless of the medical outcome still hanging in precarious balance, something irreversible had occurred. Their shared experience had transformed them both, Sarah incorporating aspects of Western medical understanding into her traditional framework, Mackenzie expanding her evidence-based practice to include cultural dimensions previously outside her consciousness. Most profoundly, the twins, Michael strong and steady, Luna fragile but fighting, had begun their lives within this integrated space, their very existence a bridge between worlds that conventional thinking often positioned as separate, but their experience proved were complementary dimensions of the same reality. Dawn of August 16th broke with startling clarity after days of storm-shrouded twilight. Sunlight penetrated the cabin's windows for the first time since their ordeal began, casting golden illumination across the makeshift medical space that had sustained 4 lives through catastrophic conditions. This natural transformation mirrored subtle but significant improvements in their medical circumstances. Sarah's fever had broken during the night, Luna's breathing had stabilized enough to require only intermittent assistance, and Michael continued, demonstrating remarkable vigor despite his premature arrival. "The storm has passed," Mackenzie observed, stepping outside briefly to assess conditions, "but the aftermath might be even more challenging for rescue operations." This assessment proved grimly accurate as her expanded survey revealed the full extent of the landscape's transformation. What had been Forest Service roads were now impassable ravines carved by floodwaters. Debris fields of shattered trees created natural barricades across former access routes. The topography itself had been fundamentally altered by erosion patterns and landslides visible on surrounding slopes. Despite these challenges, Mackenzie maintained professional optimism when reporting her observations to Sarah. "Search teams will be mobilizing with the improved weather. Our coordinates have been transmitted, and multiple agencies will coordinate efforts now that air operations are possible." Sarah received this information with the quiet stoicism Mackenzie had come to recognize as characteristic Apache response to both crisis and potential relief. "My brother won't need coordinates," she stated with calm certainty. Gabriel follows. Different signs. This simple assertion, delivered without emphasis but with absolute conviction, struck Mackenzie not as desperate hope, but as statement of fact from Sarah's cultural framework. Having witnessed the effectiveness of other traditional knowledge Sarah had shared, Mackenzie found herself neither dismissing nor questioning this confidence in methods outside conventional search protocols. Their 4th day in the cabin established a rhythm that balanced medical necessity with emerging recovery. Sarah's strength showed consistent improvement, allowing her to take greater responsibility for the twins' basic care, while Mackenzie focused on maintaining their shelter, managing dwindling supplies, and continuing attempts at communication. Their collaborative approach had evolved into an efficient partnership that transcended conventional provider-patient dynamics. "The infection has definitively responded to treatment," Mackenzie noted during her midday assessment of Sarah's condition. The combination of conventional antibiotics and traditional herbal applications had effectively addressed the postpartum infection that had threatened Sarah's life. "Your vital signs are stabilizing, and the healing process is well established." Sarah nodded acknowledgement while adjusting Luna's position to optimize her breathing. "The plants have spirits that respond when approached with respect," she explained. "My grandmother says modern medicine sometimes forgets to introduce itself properly to the healing it seeks." This poetic articulation of traditional perspective provided Mackenzie with fresh insight into cultural frameworks she had studied intellectually but now experienced directly. The characterization of relationship-based rather than extraction-based healing resonated with limitations she had sometimes sensed in her conventional training. Their conversation was interrupted by a sound that immediately captured both women's attention, the distant but unmistakable rhythm of helicopter rotors. The auditory signature approached, faded, then approached again in a pattern consistent with grid search operations. Mackenzie immediately moved to the cabin's small clearing, deploying the emergency signal mirror from her kit to reflect sunlight in the distinctive three-flash distress pattern taught in wilderness training. For nearly 20 minutes, the helicopter sounds continued their tantalizing proximity without direct overhead approach. The search pattern was methodical, but clearly not centered on their exact location despite the coordinates Mackenzie had transmitted. Limitations of the satellite message transmission, perhaps incomplete coordinate data or reception errors, had apparently created sufficient navigational discrepancy to place them outside the primary search grid. As the helicopter sounds gradually faded to the south, Mackenzie returned to the cabin with carefully controlled expression. "They're searching, but not precisely in our location," she explained, balancing honesty with appropriate caution regarding Sarah's still fragile condition. "They'll expand their search pattern as they clear each grid section." Sarah received this assessment with remarkable equanimity. "Official searches follow maps," she observed without apparent disappointment. "My brother follows connections that don't need satellites." Before Mackenzie could respond to this continued confidence in traditional tracking methods, a new sound captured their attention, not mechanical, but human. A distinctive three-note whistle penetrated the forest ambient noise, its pattern clearly intentional rather than natural. Sarah's response was immediate, her face transforming with recognition. "Gabriel," she stated with absolute certainty, then demonstrated surprising strength by producing a responding whistle, complex and melodic despite her weakened condition. The exchange continued, another whistle from the forest, clearly closer, answered by Sarah with a different pattern that seemed to communicate specific information rather than merely acknowledging presence. Mackenzie watched this sonic conversation with growing amazement, recognizing a sophisticated communication system adapted to forest acoustics and designed to carry precise meaning across distances. "He asks about our condition," Sarah explained, between exchanges. "I've told him about the twins and that we have a doctor." The communication continued with increasing proximity until a final whistle sounded from just beyond the cabin's clearing. "He's here," Sarah confirmed, her eyes fixed on the cabin doorway with anticipation that transcended her physical limitations. The man who entered moments later demonstrated nothing of the disorientation or uncertainty one might expect from someone who had navigated catastrophically altered terrain without conventional guidance. Gabriel Whitefeather moved with the focused certainty of someone arriving at an exact destination rather than concluding a search. Tall and lean with features that mirrored his sister's, he wore practical wilderness gear, supplemented with items Mackenzie recognized as having traditional significance: a medicine pouch at his belt, specific feathers secured to his pack straps, and leather wrappings around his wrists, adorned with symbolic beadwork. His initial attention focused exclusively on Sarah, crossing to her bedside with swift but controlled movements. Their exchange occurred first in Apache, musical syllables, flowing between them, conveying information Mackenzie couldn't comprehend, but recognized as methodical rather than merely emotional. Only after this communication did Gabriel acknowledge her presence with a nod of profound respect. "You kept them alive through the great storm," he stated, the simple declaration carrying weight beyond its words. "Our family owes you a debt that cannot be measured." "I was doing my job," Mackenzie responded instinctively, then realizing the inadequacy of this conventional disclaimer, added, "Sarah and the twins taught me as much as I helped them, especially about combining our different healing approaches." Gabriel's expression reflected approval of this acknowledgement. "Few doctors recognize wisdom beyond their textbooks," he observed, then turned his attention to the twins. His examination combined elements Mackenzie recognized from pediatric assessment protocols with traditional observational methods she had glimpsed during her work with tribal communities. "The boy has strong spirit," he noted, lightly touching Michael's chest with practiced fingers. "The girl fights between worlds, her body here, her spirit not fully anchored yet." This assessment aligned perfectly with Mackenzie's medical evaluation, but framed the conditions through cultural understanding that added dimensions beyond physiological parameters. After completing his examination, Gabriel retrieved items from his pack that revealed preparation far beyond standard search equipment. He had brought specialized infant formula compatible with premature digestive systems, neonatal-sized swaddling blankets, and herbal preparations similar to those Sarah had described for specific conditions. "You knew exactly what to bring," Mackenzie observed, professional appreciation mixing with growing awe at the precision of his preparation. "How did you know twins were involved, or their premature condition?" Gabriel's response conveyed matter-of-fact acceptance of knowledge transmission that Western frameworks would struggle to categorize. "Our grandmother saw them in her dreaming 3 nights ago," he explained, while preparing a specialized herbal infusion. "Said they arrived early through thunder and needed specific medicines. She prepared what I should bring." Rather than dismissing this explanation, Mackenzie's recent experiences had created openness to understanding beyond her previous parameters. She watched as Gabriel administered the traditional preparations with precision that reflected both cultural knowledge and clinical training, recognizing techniques consistent with his physician-assistant background integrated seamlessly with traditional methods. As he worked, Gabriel explained his tracking methodology, a system that had allowed him to navigate directly to their location despite catastrophically altered terrain and absence of conventional navigational references. "Official search teams follow coordinates and grid patterns," he elaborated, echoing Sarah's earlier observation. "I followed connected signs that speak to those who know how to listen." These connected signs combined remarkable observational skills, reading subtle environmental indicators most would overlook, with traditional knowledge of how landscape features remain relationally consistent despite surface transformations. Most strikingly, his methodology incorporated what Western frameworks might term intuitive elements, but his tradition considered practical applications of inherited awareness techniques. "Our grandmother taught tracking that uses all senses, including those modern education forgets to name," he explained, while checking Luna's respiratory function with clinical precision. Connection awareness lets family find family across any distance if the need is great enough. This explanation, delivered without mystical emphasis but as practical methodology, challenged Mackenzie's understanding of perception possibilities while aligning with experiences she had glimpsed throughout her rural medical practice. The integration of Gabriel's tracking approach with his evident clinical expertise mirrored her own evolving integration of multiple healing traditions. Having stabilized his initial assessment and treatment approach, Gabriel outlined the evacuation plan he had developed. "I've established contact with emergency services operating from the Northern Sector base camp," he explained, retrieving a more advanced satellite communication device than Mackenzie's from his pack. Their helicopter operations are restricted by debris fields, but a suitable landing zone exists approximately 2 miles northwest of our position. The clinical precision of this information contrasted with his traditional tracking methods, demonstrating his comfortable navigation between knowledge systems. "If we start now, we can reach the extraction point before sunset. I've brought a modified travois for Sarah and the twins that can navigate the terrain conditions between here and there." Mackenzie examined the collapsed transport system he produced. A hybrid design that incorporated both traditional Apache travois principles and modern lightweight materials. The engineering reflected the same integration of knowledge systems evident in his medical approach, practical innovation that respected traditional wisdom while incorporating contemporary resources. "This will work perfectly," she confirmed after assessing the design against Sarah's medical transport needs. "I'm impressed by the modification for infant security within the adult support framework." Gabriel acknowledged her professional assessment with a nod that recognized shared understanding across their different training backgrounds. "The old ways and new ways can strengthen each other when neither claims to be the only path," he observed, a philosophy that clearly guided his approach across domains. The preparation for evacuation proceeded with methodical efficiency. Gabriel and Mackenzie worked complementary roles that leveraged their respective expertise, her medical prioritization, ensuring Sarah's stability during transport, his environmental assessment, establishing the safest route navigation despite radically altered terrain conditions. Throughout this collaboration, their communication developed increasing shorthand efficiency as each recognized the other's competence within their domains. Sarah watched their preparation with evident pride in both her brother and the physician, who had saved her children. "I told you they would understand each other," she commented as Gabriel and Mackenzie discussed optimal positioning for Luna's respiratory support during transport. Healing recognizes healing across different languages. This observation captured the essence of what had developed, not merely cooperation between individuals, but integration between knowledge systems that conventional frameworks often positioned as separate or even oppositional. The practical problem-solving required by their extreme circumstances had revealed complementary strengths rather than contradictory approaches. As final transport preparations were completed, Gabriel paused to perform what Mackenzie recognized as a ceremonial blessing for the journey. Unlike the abbreviated or self-conscious adaptations of traditional practices she had sometimes witnessed in medical contexts, his implementation maintained complete cultural integrity while acknowledging the practical circumstances. "Our ancestors traveled before us, through deserts and mountains, through storms and droughts," he intoned in English rather than Apache, a choice Mackenzie recognized as intentional inclusion. "They carried children to safety through challenges greater than today's. Their strength flows through our steps, their wisdom guides our choices, their protection surrounds these new lives beginning their journey." The simple ceremony integrated all present: traditional practitioner, conventional physician, recovering mother, newborn twins, into a unified purpose that transcended cultural boundaries while respecting their significance. Rather than feeling like an outsider to this cultural practice, Mackenzie found herself incorporated as the essential participant in both practical and symbolic dimensions. As they prepared to depart the cabin that had sheltered their extraordinary convergence of lives and traditions, Sarah made a request that crystallized the significance of their shared experience. "Before we leave this place," she asked, looking between her brother and the physician who had delivered her children, "I want to give the twins their Apache names, with both of you as witnesses." This request, to conduct a significant cultural ceremony in unprecedented circumstances, reflected Sarah's understanding that their shared experience transcended conventional categories of emergency medical care into territory of profound cultural and personal significance. Gabriel's quiet approval confirmed the appropriateness of this adaptation of traditional timing. "Normally, this would wait until the community gathering," he explained to Mackenzie, "but what has happened here already stands outside normal patterns." The naming ceremony, though conducted in emergency circumstances far from tribal lands, carried a dignified formality that transformed the humble cabin. Sarah sat upright with evident effort, each twin positioned carefully in the crook of an arm. Gabriel prepared the space with minimal but significant elements: a small pouch of sacred pollen, eagle feathers, and a ceremonial stone vessel containing water he had collected from a spring near the cabin. "Our traditions teach that a child's first name carries power that shapes their path," Gabriel explained to Mackenzie, including her in the cultural context with respectful recognition of her role in the twins' birth. "The Apache name remains known only within the family and community, protecting the child's spirit while connecting them to ancestors who carried similar names." Though clearly adapted to their extraordinary circumstances, the ceremony maintained essential cultural elements: specific songs offered in the Apache language, symbolic application of natural elements representing cardinal directions, and formal acknowledgement of family lineage extending back 7 generations. Mackenzie observed with profound appreciation, recognizing a tradition that had survived centuries of oppression to continue providing cultural identity and spiritual foundation. "For our son, strong from his first breath," Sarah proclaimed in a voice that found new strength through ceremonial purpose, the Apache named Tsebigai, stone warrior, acknowledging both the mountains that surrounded his birth and the strength he has shown from his first moments. Gabriel confirmed this naming with traditional response, then aided Sarah in applying a small amount of sacred pollen to Michael's forehead in symbolic blessing. The process repeated for Luna, whose Apache name, Nalinsuni, meaning airbringer, acknowledged both her respiratory challenges and the transformation she had undergone through combined healing approaches. "Dr. Hayes," Sarah continued, surprising Mackenzie with direct inclusion in the ceremony, "in our tradition, those who witness naming carry special responsibility to remember the child's true name and to stand as protection if parents cannot. Will you accept this sacred trust?" The request transcended professional boundaries into territory of profound cultural and personal significance. Rather than the observer role Mackenzie had anticipated, she was being incorporated as functional member of the family system through traditional protocols. The responsibility being offered reflected absolute trust and recognized relationship that would extend beyond their medical emergency. "I accept this responsibility," Mackenzie responded, instinctively matching the ceremonial gravity of the moment. "I will hold their names in trust and stand as protection when needed." Gabriel completed the ceremony with final blessings that incorporated all present into a unified spiritual framework, his words weaving connections between family bonds, professional care, and shared survival through extraordinary circumstances. The simple ceremony, lasting less than 20 minutes, established foundations that would shape relationships for decades to come. With ceremonial obligations fulfilled, practical evacuation procedures resumed with renewed focus. The twins were secured in specialized carriers Gabriel had designed to maintain optimal positioning during transport, while allowing rapid access for medical intervention if needed. Sarah was carefully transferred to the modified travois, her position calculated to minimize strain while maintaining dignity during the challenging journey ahead. The extraction point is approximately 2 hours from here with current terrain. Conditions, Gabriel explained as final preparations were completed. I'll lead with periodic stops for medical assessment. Dr. Hayes will monitor vital signs during transit. We've coordinated with emergency services for helicopter evacuation at 17:30 hours. The journey through the catastrophically altered landscape provided Mackenzie with empirical appreciation of Gabriel's tracking abilities. Conventional navigation would have proven nearly impossible. Landmarks obliterated, trails vanished beneath landslides, familiar features transformed beyond recognition. Yet Gabriel navigated with unwavering confidence, identifying passage routes where none seemed possible and anticipating terrain challenges before they became visible. How do you read these patterns so effectively? Mackenzie asked during a brief rest period, professional curiosity transcending exhaustion. The landscape has been completely transformed by the storm. Gabriel's response revealed methodological sophistication beyond what most Western tracking frameworks acknowledged. Surface features change, but relationship patterns remain, he explained, indicating subtle interactions between geological formations, vegetation distribution, and drainage systems. Our traditions teach reading the permanent language beneath temporary appearances. This concept, focusing on relational constants rather than superficial features, resonated with diagnostic principles Mackenzie had developed through years of rural medicine. The parallels between their seemingly different methodologies revealed shared cognitive foundations despite divergent cultural expressions. Both approached complex systems by identifying core patterns beneath variable presentations. The evacuation journey, though physically demanding for all involved, proceeded without major complications. Sarah maintained remarkable strength despite her recent medical crises, finding reserves through what appeared to be both physical determination and cultural resources. The twins responded well to the carefully designed transport system, their vital signs remaining stable despite movement challenges. Mackenzie found herself impressed not only by Gabriel's navigational precision, but by his ongoing medical assessments that seamlessly integrated conventional vital sign monitoring with traditional observational methods. His evaluation of Luna's respiratory status, for instance, incorporated both standard rate and quality measures and subtle indicators Mackenzie had not been trained to observe. Skin luminosity changes, specific rhythm patterns, and energy field characteristics recognized in traditional practice. You see dimensions I wasn't taught to look for, she acknowledged during one assessment collaboration, professional humility transcending disciplinary boundaries. There's diagnostic information in those observations. Gabriel nodded, recognizing both the acknowledgement and its significance coming from a conventionally trained physician. Western medicine focuses on measurable parameters, he observed without judgment. Our traditions maintained awareness of subtle energetic components because we lack technological measurement tools. Both approaches detect real phenomena through different methods. This simple framework, different methods perceiving complementary dimensions of the same reality, captured the essence of what both practitioners had demonstrated throughout the crisis. Rather than competing explanatory systems, their traditions offered complementary perceptual tools that, when integrated, provided more comprehensive understanding than either alone. As predicted, they reached the designated extraction point shortly. Before the scheduled helicopter arrival, the location, a natural clearing expanded by storm damage, provided sufficient space for safe landing while remaining accessible despite surrounding debris fields. Gabriel established final communication with emergency services, confirming their position and the patient's status with the precise medical terminology of his physician assistant training. The helicopter's approach, when it finally became audible, produced complex emotions for all present. Relief at imminent medical resources mixed with recognition that their extraordinary integration of traditional and conventional approaches would soon encounter institutional systems unprepared for such synthesis. The natural laboratory of extreme circumstances that had fostered their collaborative innovation would be replaced by standardized protocols and specialized departmentalization. When we reach medical facilities, Sarah voiced this concern as the helicopter sounds grew louder. Will they understand the healing that's already occurred? Will they respect what we've done? The question captured legitimate concerns about how traditional elements of their integrated care approach might be received within conventional medical settings. Mackenzie recognized the potential for dismissal or marginalization of critical components that had proven essential to their survival and recovery. "I'll make sure they understand," she promised, the commitment extending beyond mere information transfer to active advocacy. The medical documentation will clearly establish how both approaches contributed to successful outcomes. Gabriel's expression reflected appreciation of this commitment while acknowledging the challenges it might entail. Creating space for both paths within conventional systems requires persistent effort, he observed, from evident experience navigating these boundaries. But what has happened here deserves proper recognition. As the helicopter descended into the clearing, Mackenzie experienced a moment of heightened awareness, recognition that their shared experience contained significance extending beyond immediate medical outcomes. The integration they had achieved through necessity carried implications for broader healthcare approaches, particularly for communities where cultural healing traditions remained vital despite marginalization by conventional systems. The emergency medical crew that emerged from the helicopter displayed the efficient professionalism characteristic of air evacuation teams, quickly assessing the situation while establishing standard protocols. Their initial focus, appropriately, centered on the most vulnerable patients. Luna's respiratory status and Sarah's post-hemorrhagic condition receiving primary attention. Mackenzie provided precise medical briefing that balanced comprehensive information with strategic emphasis on the integrated care approaches that had proven effective. The infant's respiratory function stabilized through a combination of modified CPAP and traditional herbal treatments, she explained, documenting specific techniques. The mother's hemorrhage and subsequent infection responded to coordinated, conventional and traditional interventions. This framing, presenting traditional elements as coordinated components of successful treatment rather than separate cultural practices, reflected strategic advocacy based on Mackenzie's years navigating healthcare systems. By emphasizing measurable outcomes rather than methodological divisions, she established framework for continued integration during hospital treatment. The evacuation team, though clearly oriented toward standard emergency procedures, demonstrated respectful professionalism toward both the patients and the integrated approach that had sustained them. The lead paramedic, after completing primary assessment, acknowledged the exceptional circumstances with straightforward appreciation. You kept all three alive through impossible conditions with whatever you had available, he stated simply to both Mackenzie and Gabriel. That deserves respect regardless of methods. We'll maintain continuity with treatments that are clearly working. This pragmatic response, focusing on demonstrated effectiveness rather than methodological orthodoxy, reflected the practical integration often found among frontline medical providers, particularly those experienced with rural and cross-cultural contexts. The helicopter team efficiently prepared all three patients for transport while accommodating Gabriel's continued presence as both family member and healthcare provider. "You'll both accompany us," the flight medic confirmed, recognizing the importance of continuity. "We've been advised to maintain all beneficial care approaches through transition to hospital services." This directive, suggesting institutional recognition of their integrated methodologies, reflected influence beyond the immediate evacuation team. Mackenzie later learned that Dr. Taylor Mitchell had engaged directly with hospital administration upon confirmation of their rescue, advocating specifically for continuation of effective treatments regardless of conventional or traditional origins. Final preparations for airlift were completed. Mackenzie found herself alongside Gabriel, watching as Sarah and the twins were secured in the helicopter's medical transport system. Despite exhaustion and the emotional intensity of their ordeal, both experienced a moment of shared recognition, awareness that their combined efforts had not merely sustained life through catastrophic circumstances, but demonstrated integration, possibilities with significance beyond their immediate situation. "What happened here matters beyond these lives," Gabriel observed quietly, the helicopter rotors beginning their acceleration sequence behind him. "It shows a path many have sought, but few have walked successfully." Mackenzie nodded, understanding the reference to integrated healthcare approaches that respected both conventional and traditional wisdom. "I've glimpsed possibilities I didn't know existed," she acknowledged, effectiveness transcending either approach alone. "My grandmother would say you've always had healing hands, but now have healing eyes too," Gabriel responded with subtle humor that acknowledged their evolved connection, seeing beyond conventional boundaries to what actually works. This simple recognition that healing effectiveness rather than methodological orthodoxy should determine practice captured the essential lesson of their shared experience. Not abandonment of evidence-based principles, but expansion of what constituted valid evidence and recognition of healing dimensions beyond conventional parameters. As they boarded the helicopter for the journey to comprehensive medical services, Mackenzie carried not only exhaustion from their ordeal, but awakened awareness that would fundamentally reshape her professional practice. The integration they had achieved through necessity contained seeds of methodological innovation with potential applications far beyond their specific emergency. The flight to regional medical facilities passed with the focused efficiency characteristic of emergency medical transport. Continuous assessment and stabilization procedures maintained the fragile but improving status of all three patients, with particular attention to Luna's respiratory function and Sarah's recovering circulatory status. Throughout the 30-minute journey, both Mackenzie and Gabriel maintained active roles in monitoring and treatment, their collaborative approach now incorporated into the formal medical response system. Their arrival at White Mountain Medical Center initiated the carefully coordinated transition protocols characteristic of Level 2 trauma facilities. The receiving team, clearly briefed on the extraordinary circumstances of the case, demonstrated both standard procedural rigor and unusual openness to the integrated care approaches that had proven effective under extreme conditions. "We'll maintain continuity with all functioning treatment modalities," confirmed Dr. Eleanor Yazzie, the attending physician who greeted them on the landing pad. Her Apache heritage and board certification in emergency medicine positioned her uniquely to bridge conventional and traditional approaches. Our priority is continued stabilization, not methodological orthodoxy. This pragmatic prioritization of effectiveness over conventional boundaries reflected the influence of progressive institutional leadership, a medical center that had developed formal integration protocols for indigenous healing practices alongside standard care when evidence supported improved outcomes. The facility, serving significant Native American populations, had pioneered approaches that most conventional hospitals had yet to consider. 4 seasons had completed their cycle since Mackenzie Hayes delivered the Whitefeather twins during the catastrophic monsoon Maximus. Summer had returned to the Superstition Mountains, bringing renewal to landscapes that had been fundamentally transformed by the historic storm. On a clear August morning 1 year after the dramatic birth, Mackenzie stood at the edge of a ceremonial clearing on the San Carlos Apache reservation, watching final preparations for a celebration that would formally acknowledge bonds formed through extraordinary circumstances. The physical evidence of her ordeal had faded completely. The exhaustion that had required weeks of recovery, the persistent tension in shoulders that had maintained Luna's breathing support for countless hours, the hypervigilance that had lingered long after returning to conventional medical practice, all had gradually resolved through time and intentional healing practices drawn from both her conventional training and newfound appreciation for traditional approaches. To casual observers, Dr. Mackenzie Hayes appeared simply as she had before, a dedicated rural physician continuing her commitment to underserved communities. But fundamental transformations remained, visible not in physical markers, but in practice patterns, relationship frameworks, and philosophical orientations that had been permanently altered by her experience with the Whitefeather family. These changes manifested most evidently in her evolving medical approach. The Cooper Springs Clinic now featured a dedicated space for integrated care consultations, where traditional healers from multiple cultural backgrounds collaborated with conventional providers on complex cases. Pharmaceutical interventions remained available, but were increasingly complemented by evidence-supported traditional alternatives when appropriate. Patient care plans acknowledged cultural frameworks as essential components of effective healing rather than peripheral considerations to be accommodated. The medicine wheel teaches balance from all directions, Sarah had explained during one of Mackenzie's regular visits to the twins. This simple framework, approaching wellness through multiple complementary pathways rather than linear, singular approaches, had transformed from abstract concept to practical methodology in Mackenzie's evolving practice. Professional response to these innovations had ranged from enthusiastic support to skeptical concern. Dr. Taylor Mitchell had embraced the integrated approach, leveraging her administrative position to establish formal protocols for traditional healing incorporation. Throughout the regional medical system, other colleagues maintained cautious distance, acknowledging positive outcomes while hesitating to adopt methods that challenged conventional training boundaries. Most importantly, patient responses, particularly among Indigenous community members, had been overwhelmingly positive. Individuals who had previously avoided medical services now engaged actively with a system that respected their cultural healing frameworks. Compliance with critical interventions improved when delivered through integrated approaches that acknowledged traditional wisdom alongside evidence-based practice. These professional transformations, while significant, represented only one dimension of Mackenzie's evolved reality. The personal connections formed through her extraordinary experience with the Whitefeather family had developed into relationships that transcended conventional categories, neither simply professional nor artificially adopted, but authentic, bonds formed through shared survival of extreme circumstances. The ceremony about to begin would formally acknowledge these connections within Apache cultural frameworks. Under the guidance of Elizabeth Whitefeather, Sarah and Gabriel's grandmother, and the tribe's most respected elder healer, the community had organized a traditional integration ceremony adapted specifically for their unprecedented circumstances. Gabriel approached from the ceremonial preparation area, his formal attire combining traditional elements with contemporary adaptations characteristic of his balanced cultural navigation. "Grandmother says it's time," he informed Mackenzie, with the quiet confidence that had impressed her since their first meeting during the rescue. "The twins are ready, and Sarah wants you with her before we begin." Following Gabriel through the gathering community members, Mackenzie received greetings that reflected her evolved status, neither outsider nor full tribal member, but someone honored with specific relationship recognition that carried both privileges and responsibilities. The year since the dramatic birth had included regular visits, shared healing work, and gradually deepening understanding of cultural frameworks that now influenced her entire approach to medicine. Sarah waited in the ceremonial preparation area, transformed from the critically ill young mother Mackenzie had first encountered. Healthy and strong, she now directed preparations for her twins with confident cultural authority, instructing family members in specific ceremonial requirements. While maintaining the centered calm Mackenzie had witnessed even during their most desperate hours. "Dr. Mackenzie," Sarah greeted her with the hybrid title that had become their customary address, acknowledging both professional identity and personal connection. "The twins have been asking for you all morning." This simple statement reflected the remarkable relationship that had developed. The twins, now thriving one-year-olds, recognized Mackenzie with special attachment distinct from their response to other non-family members. Michael and Luna, dressed in ceremonial clothing that incorporated both traditional elements and practical considerations for active toddlers, demonstrated dramatically different developmental paths that nevertheless highlighted the resilience that had characterized them from birth. Michael, strong and determined from his first breath, had reached physical milestones ahead of typical developmental schedules, already walking with confidence and demonstrating remarkable coordination. Luna, who had fought for every breath during those critical first days, had developed extraordinary observational intensity and communication capabilities that transcended her limited vocabulary. Though physically smaller than her brother, her focused attention and emotional responsiveness reflected remarkable cognitive development. "They're thriving beyond any medical projections," Mackenzie observed, professional assessment naturally blending with personal affection as Luna reached for her with recognition that spanned their year of regular contact. "They carry the strength of their beginning," Elizabeth Whitefeather stated, joining them with the dignified presence that had made her the tribe's most respected elder. At 87, she combined traditional wisdom with pragmatic engagement with contemporary realities, the original model for the integrated approach Gabriel had implemented in his own practice, and that had proven crucial during the twins' birth. What happened during the Great Storm contained meaning beyond mere survival, Elizabeth continued, her assessment encompassing spiritual dimensions that Mackenzie had grown increasingly comfortable acknowledging. The integration of healing paths protected these children for purposes still unfolding. This perspective, that their extraordinary experience contained meaning beyond coincidental circumstances, had initially challenged Mackenzie's scientifically oriented framework. Yet her continued engagement with the Whitefeather family and observation of the twins' remarkable development had created openness to interpretive dimensions beyond conventional medical parameters. The ceremonial proceedings, when they finally began, demonstrated the same integration that had characterized their shared healing experience. Traditional elements, sacred songs in the Apache language, blessing rituals using elements from the natural world, formal acknowledgement of ancestral connections, were complemented by contemporary adaptations that accommodated the twins' developmental needs and incorporated Mackenzie's presence without cultural appropriation. The ceremony's central purpose, formally establishing Mackenzie's relationship with the twins and broader Whitefeather family, followed traditional protocols for recognizing non-blood connections that carried specific responsibilities. Elizabeth explained each element for Mackenzie's benefit, creating understanding without simplification that might diminish cultural significance. In our tradition, those who bring children into the world during extraordinary circumstances form bonds recognized as family, she elaborated during a transitional moment in the ceremony. Not replacing blood relations, but establishing complementary connections with distinct responsibilities. These responsibilities, formally articulated through ceremonial language, included ongoing presence in the children's lives, contribution to their understanding of health across different knowledge systems, and commitment to maintaining connection between the worlds they would navigate throughout their lives. The role being formalized, neither exactly godparent nor adopted family, in Western frameworks, carried specific cultural significance within Apache tradition. Do you accept these responsibilities toward these children and this family? Elizabeth asked, when the ceremonial foundations had been established, the formal question requiring specific response. I accept these responsibilities, Mackenzie confirmed, the words carrying weight beyond emotional affirmation into territory of cultural covenant. I will maintain these connections and fulfill these obligations through all seasons to come. The community's response, a distinctive vocalization that transcended conventional applause, acknowledged this commitment with appropriate ceremonial recognition. What followed transcended mere formality as Gabriel stepped forward to present Mackenzie with symbolic items that represented her new status. These belong to our mother, he explained, offering a medicine pouch and woven band with specific beadwork patterns. They represent healing across generations and connection beyond blood. They acknowledge your place within our family circle. This gifting of family items, Sarah later explained, represented recognition far beyond conventional appreciation into territory of permanent kinship acknowledgement. The specific items, tools of a healer from a family with 7-generation healing traditions, carried particular significance that recognized Mackenzie's role not merely as physician who had assisted a birth, but as practitioner who had demonstrated integrated healing alignment with their traditional values. The ceremony continued with community acknowledgement dimensions, formal recognition by tribal elders, symbolic incorporation through shared food and specific blessings, and public declaration of the relationship being established. Throughout these proceedings, the twins remained central focuses, not merely as recipients of cultural transmission, but as individuals whose extraordinary beginning warranted specific community acknowledgement. As ceremonial components transitioned toward community celebration aspects, Gabriel joined Mackenzie at the periphery of the gathering, where they could observe interactions while engaging in the conversation that had developed between them throughout the past year, dialogue that bridged their different training backgrounds, while exploring shared healing philosophies. What began in crisis has become something neither tradition anticipated, he observed, watching as tribal members incorporated Mackenzie into celebration activities with natural inclusivity rather than forced accommodation. A physician who sees beyond Western boundaries, connected to a family that values traditional wisdom without rejecting modern knowledge. This assessment captured the essence of what had evolved, integration based not on artificial combination, but on recognition of complementary strengths across traditions. Their professional collaboration had expanded beyond the twins' care to include multiple joint projects, research documenting positive outcomes from integrated approaches, educational initiatives bringing traditional healers and conventional providers together for mutual learning, and clinical protocols that honored both knowledge systems in patient care planning. "I never expected my career to take this direction," Mackenzie acknowledged, watching as Luna demonstrated remarkable balance while participating in a children's dance circle despite having begun life with such precarious health. "But I can't imagine returning to practice that doesn't include these dimensions." The transformation extended beyond methodology to fundamental conceptualization of healing itself, from technological intervention against pathology to facilitation of wellness through multiple complementary pathways. This expanded framework didn't abandon evidence-based practice, but broadened understanding of what constituted valid evidence while acknowledging healing dimensions beyond measurable physiological parameters. "Our grandmother says true healing means wholeness across body, mind, spirit, and community," Gabriel noted, referencing the framework that had guided their integrated approach. Different traditions develop tools for different dimensions, but complete healing requires all pathways. As sunset approached and ceremonial activities transitioned to community celebration, Sarah joined them, with Michael asleep against her shoulder, and Luna maintaining remarkable wakefulness despite the day's activities. The family unit they now formed, biological mother, traditional healer, conventional physician, and extraordinary children, represented integration not merely as abstract concept, but as lived reality with continuing implications. "1 year ago, we survived through combined wisdom when neither path alone would have been enough," Sarah observed, articulating the essential understanding that had emerged from their experience. "Today, we celebrate not just survival, but new possibilities for healing across different worlds." This simple articulation, healing across different worlds, captured the essence of what had been formalized through ceremonial recognition. Not merely professional collaboration or personal friendship, but committed engagement with integration possibilities that honored distinct traditions while creating space for innovative synthesis. As stars appeared above the reservation landscapes that had sustained Apache communities through countless generations of challenge and adaptation, Mackenzie Hayes found herself in territory she could never have anticipated when she first left Boston for rural Arizona practice. The conventional physician had discovered healing dimensions beyond her training's parameters. The dedicated professional had found family connections beyond biological frameworks. The evidence-based practitioner had recognized validity in approaches. Her education had largely dismissed, most significantly, the extraordinary children whose lives had begun under catastrophic circumstances, now represented living embodiments of integration possibilities, thriving through combined approaches that neither tradition alone could have provided. Michael and Luna Whitefeather, with their remarkable resilience and complementary development patterns, carried the legacy of that historic storm birth into future generations that would continue navigating between traditional wisdom and contemporary knowledge with increasingly seamless integration. As ceremonial fires illuminated faces of the community that had formerly acknowledged her place within their family systems, Mackenzie recognized that what had begun as emergency medical intervention during a catastrophic storm had evolved into something with significance, extending far beyond individual survival. The integration they had pioneered under desperate circumstances now offered healing pathways with potential applications across cultural boundaries and knowledge systems that conventional frameworks, positioned as separate but their experience, proved were complementary dimensions of the same reality. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.